Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Tammy Patzer, and I'm really happy to introduce you to today's guest, Joel Helfer, and he is known as the 10-minute radio producer. And he is an AM talk radio producer, #1 Amazon best-selling author, speaker, and a current talk show host on Celebrity Entrepreneur Radio and iTunes show. But today, we are actually going to go to what we call the other side of the mic. And Joel is going to give us some ideas that if you are somebody who is trying to build impact, influence, and more income, and of course, ultimate authority, you're going to really want to listen up and tune in and take notes and listen to what Joel has to say about, let's just call it the truth about podcasting. Joel, welcome.
Hi, Tammy. Thank you very much for having me on your show.
Let's get started, and let's give a little bit of background about you. You are a radio producer, so let's talk about how you got started doing that before we get into the meat of our interview.
Okay. A couple of years ago, I joined a group on Facebook, an authority group, and I started to meet people. And by accident, this was sheer accident, a live AM talk show host in Chicago, 560 AM radio, his name is Mark Imperial, saw some of the things I was doing, and he called me up one day and he said, I need some help in getting guests for my radio show. And I have a real strong business background. I was in the construction business, so I did a lot of business over the phone, got a lot of clients that way. And he said, can you help me get guests for my radio show? And I said, what does it entail? And he described it to me. And then he says, if you do this, I'm going to make you my radio producer. And I said to myself, gee, that's a great title. That distinguishes me a little different. So I said, okay, I'll try it. And over a period of a couple of years, we developed a lot of very unique ways of getting guests for. He was on real live radio, syndicated all over the United States, actually all over the world with Digital Talk Show now. And then we actually applied it to podcasting. And what happened is that I found a niche for myself that I enjoy, because if you do any research, like, for example, the Washington Post just came out with an article that said last year there were over 1 billion downloads on podcasting, and almost 75 million people a month listen to internet radio. So it's become a real craze. It's exploded. But I picked a real little niche of it that I enjoy, and that's helping people become guests as opposed to talk show hosts. And that's what I do. And it all started by accident. That's sometimes the best way things start, but it turned into a very nice avocation, which I enjoy. And I've created a whole training program around it.
So what you're saying is, instead of having your own podcast to grow your authority, you're saying it's a lot easier, or maybe even better, to just be a guest. So let's talk a little bit about what are some of the pros and cons of having your own podcast?
Well, when you have your own podcast, the first thing you have to do is set it up. You know, you have to create a name. You have to create a platform for it. You have to buy some equipment, not a lot, but some equipment. And then you have to start to create an image, a topic, a title, and get guests. And it's very time-consuming. And particularly today, there's so much competition. Like, for example, if you just go on iTunes, the top 200 shows is just the tip of the iceberg. So what you're doing is you're fighting an uphill battle to go from invisible to visible. And it can be done, but it's time consuming. So what I decided was, instead of going through all that, I could leverage being on internet radio and get a small sliver of the 75 million people who listen to it every month by training myself to be a guest and coming up with a message, giving the listener a little bit of education, a little bit of entertainment and fun, and promoting my name, my message, and my topic to as many different podcast talk show hosts as possible. Much easier, much more effective, much more economical, builds relationships, lots of fun, and you don't have the headache, because when I was a radio producer, it's really a big commitment and a lot of pressure to have to keep coming up with guests for your show week after week after week after week. There's a lot to it. This eliminates all that.
Yeah, some people actually do their shows daily too, and it certainly is something when you think about it. If you're trying to interview, let's say, even one guest per day, and you have a 5-day-a-week show, that could be, just daunting. So can you talk about how to become a super guest, and also maybe tell us how do you do this? It's one thing to say become a guest, but many people are like, okay, great. For example, I know I can become a guest on some local radio shows, and I think the big secret to that is if you're in a local business, that can be very powerful. But I think that using it beyond just the event of being interviewed is where you really can leverage the clout to grow your authority. But can you give us some tips on how to be an awesome guest and how to leverage one topic over and over and over again?
Sure. The most important part of being what I call a celebrity radio guest is to have at least one person help you do this, whether it's a publicist, a virtual assistant, even somebody in your family. And the reason is because celebrities don't book their own shows. So if you want to position yourself with a little more authority, a little more exclusivity, the first thing you do is you need somebody to actually book the interviews for you. And that's easily done. You can do it through a lot of different services, hire someone, or I have a program where I actually explain to you exactly how you very quickly teach someone how to book the shows for you. So that's the first thing, is you actually, and then the next thing is you have what it's called a one sheet. It's one piece of paper, and on the one piece of paper is all the information a talk show host would need in order to make a decision as to whether or not you should be on his show. And what you want to do, the first rule of it, is to make it real easy. Like, for example, you want to put your topic. You want to put the reason it would be interesting to his listeners. You want to give him a few questions to ask. And you want to do everything from the standpoint of the talk show host without even mentioning who you are, what you do, your title, any of that. The mistake most people make is they promote themselves. And that's the common mistake that most people make. What you want to promote is your topic and the reason why it would be good for the talk show host show and his listeners. It's a completely different vantage point. It's a real easy thing to do, but most people are trying to promote themselves, and you want to promote your message. And once you get your message promoted and they like your message, then you can talk a little bit about yourself. That's how I do it.
Okay, so here's an example, everyone. When Joel contacted me, he sent me his one sheet, and listen to this and think about how you could use this today to help you create a one sheet. Number one, it's his name. Then this is what grabbed my attention. How to create and deliver a radio interview with confidence and ease so you can land more new ideal clients. Wouldn't that just grab a radio producer's attention, because they're going, wow, that is really cool, because how to create and deliver a radio interview, confidence, ease, everybody wants ease. And then, of course, why would you be on a show? You want to get new ideal clients. And then the first sentence after that was known as the 10-minute radio producer. Think about how powerful that is, because most people would think, oh my God, 10 minutes? How in the world can you prepare a guest to be on the radio in 10 minutes or less? And that is his promise in this one sheet. And then he actually talks more about himself, that supports his title. He gave me some suggested questions. And then, of course, he gave me a bio that can be sliced and diced and used to introduce him, or to give more background, or as a friend of mine likes to say, more chicken on the bone. And then, of course, he has given us some really solid information already. So it's really interesting. So I want to recap so that people who are following along can make sure they got what you told them. And this is key. You said, get someone to help you, and it can be someone to act as your, I guess a good way to call it would be your booking agent.
Correct.
So that
your publicist, if you want a fancy
your
term.
Publicist, so that you are not trying to book yourself. Okay, so they're writing or answering information about yourself, and then, of course, provide a one sheet that tells people, obviously, your name, has a photograph of you, but more than anything, has a really hot hook about why in the world would you want to interview me about this topic. Am I accurate so far, Joel?
Right on. You're doing fine.
Great. So let's get a little more into this. I believe that I saw somewhere that you call this being amazing, amazing, how to be an amazing radio guest. And I really think that this is really intriguing, because I like the idea of, personally, I know what you're talking about being a podcast producer host is a lot of work. And yes, it does give you authority, and it lends itself to being seen as a leader, because you can interview really cool people like Joel.
Thank you.
So being on the other side of the mic as the guest, for example, we'll just use today as an example. How many interviews have you given today, Joel, and how much time did it take?
This is the third interview, Tammy, that I've given today, and I started at 11:30 with the first one, which was a short one. It took about, the guy gave me 5 minutes. So that's another part. We'll get to that in a minute. Then the second one started at 12, and it lasted 15 minutes. And this one, I don't know how long. So one of the tips of being a good guest is you have to be able to adjust your message, because sometimes you get less time to get it out there than other times. So you have to have like a 5-minute message, a 10-minute message, and then maybe a 15-minute message. And it takes a little bit of thought on how to get the key points out quick. But that's not hard to do. It just takes, the key to this whole thing to be good at anything is preparation and practice. And most people, when they get this wonderful opportunity to promote themselves on a media like live radio, don't do any preparation, don't do any practice, just get on and wing it. And then they're not happy with the results. And then when they get all done, they stop and think about it, like maybe 15 minutes later in the day, or they're talking to family. Gee, I should have said this. I should have said that. I wish I would have said this. I wish I would have told this story or this joke or whatever. And that's why in a few short minutes I can prep somebody, because we can bring the best out of them, because most people have very good stories, know their business, their industry, their message very well. They just never put it in a little simple organized system in order to say it. And the trick is on radio, because usually you have a short period of time, you want to pick one problem that you're really good at solving and then solve it. And then what you do is that shows a lot of authority, and it also gives the listeners something that they can implement right away to help them in their business, their career, their personal life. It just depends on what point of view you're coming from. But you just need to pick one thing. It doesn't have to be something big. It can be something really small. But you solve it, you give them the information, and then what I do is, like what I've done today, is at the end I have a little gift that I offer people if they want more information. And that's how we do it.
Okay, so who is the ideal person for a radio interview?
The ideal, you mean the ideal guest?
The ideal guest for a radio, because maybe there's somebody out there right now saying, oh, Joel, Tammy, that's all well and good, but I don't think that I could be on the radio. I don't know what to say. I'm afraid. I don't like the way my voice sounds. All of those excuses. But can radio, a radio interview like what you're saying, could that be useful to, let's say, a plumber or
Sure.
a healthcare provider and a lawyer, a service provider, or maybe the better question is, who wouldn't be a good radio guest?
The only person, let's answer it positively.
Okay.
Radio is just a media. It's a channel. It's no different than a book, a website, an email, a postcard, a telephone call. It's just my favorite way of using it, because people like to listen to radio. Everybody does, from the minute you get up and you drive to work, you turn on the radio,
Right.
So it's a very popular medium. Going back to those numbers, 1 billion downloads a year, my God, it's crazy. So the answer is people are really comfortable listening to radio, which makes it a medium that's good for anybody who's ever listened to the radio, which is everybody.
Right.
And you don't have to worry about how your voice sounds, because 99% of the world doesn't like how their voice sounds. It's irrelevant.
Well,
nobody
that's
likes
true.
how their voice sounds.
And just to let everyone know, when we use the word radio, we're talking not only about traditional radio, which is known as, I guess it's called terrestrial radio, meaning that that's where you are talking to somebody at a radio station, but we're actually also talking about online radio or online podcasts, which are like this, for example. It's recorded, and Joel is somewhere in Florida, Windermere.
Yeah, just outside of Orlando.
He's over in Orlando. I happen to also live in Florida on the West Coast, and we're actually using a recorded telephone line to do this interview, and sometimes I will use Skype. The whole idea, obviously, is to get a recording, and this happens to be recorded, but often there are live radio stations, but you would still do it the same way. Sometimes you go into the studio, but nowadays the beauty of it is you can be in Alaska or in China and still be on the radio somewhere in the world in a live fashion or recorded fashion. So I wanted to go back to the you gave us the one tip about the one problem, one solution topic, because obviously you can cover a topic in 5 minutes or 10 minutes or and of course our interview is a little bit longer because I'm trying to get you to tell us a little bit more.
Oh, happy to.
So can you talk a little bit more about getting people ready in
Sure.
as little as 10 minutes?
Oh, one of the things you do is when you need to get ready quickly for an interview, if you get an opportunity, is just relax and enjoy it because it's fun. You look at it as a fun experience, and you don't try to be perfect because nobody is. As a matter of fact, if you make a few mistakes, you don't want to say something that's not nice or use bad language because it's recorded, so you want to be on your best behavior. But you just want to have a real conversation, just like you met somebody in your house, at a party, at a bar, on the phone. And that's how you do it. And what you do is you talk about the thing that you know the best. And that's the easiest thing to sound authentic, whatever that is. You know, like if you take, for example, like a doctor. You go into a doctor's office, and you go into an eye doctor, and he knows all about eyes. So if you have a problem, he's going to tell you how you can see better. It's that kind of a thing. And people have to have a little bit of confidence because the things they worry about is, gee, I'm going to go to dinner next week, and my brother-in-law is going to be there, and he's going to hear me on the radio, and he's going to think I sounded stupid, you know. Well, you don't have to worry about that because that isn't the case. Because the trick to this is you want a series of interviews so you keep getting better and better and better. And
practice makes perfect.
At the beginning, your first interview, your first 2 interviews, your first 5 interviews might not sound good, but that's okay because there's a lot of small market stations, or there's a lot of podcasts, or I like to use the term internet radio, shows that you can get on that don't have thousands of listeners. So the worst that happens, if you don't sound exactly how you want, you don't put that recording on your website. You do it again and again and again. And after 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 interviews, however many you can get, you will find 1 or 2 or 3 that are really good, where you sound good, where you're actually saying something worthwhile, something that's can promote you and your business. Those are the ones that you upload. Because you don't have to upload every single interview. And the odds are that with the tremendous number of podcasts, internet radio, live radio, and all the other media out there, your ideal prospect isn't going to be listening anyway. And it's the recording, the asset, that's the real asset, the digital recording that you repurpose that gets your point across.
Right. I think that's really, really important is it isn't about the interview, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or whatever the interview is. It's about how you leverage that interview after the fact and have it keep working for you. You want to talk a little bit about how people can take one interview and turn it into, I like to call it digital waterfront property, or into multiple content assets?
Sure. The first thing you do is, before you actually have your interview with the celebrity guest host, when you're having a back and forth conversation, usually there's 1 or 2 emails, is you ask your publicist, remember you're not doing this yourself because you're the celebrity, you ask your publicist if the talk show host will furnish a recording of your interview. And if there's a problem with that, or if there's any special type of communication you have to have in order to get the recording. Like, for example, this particular interview I'm doing with Tammy, I'm using a real telephone. And that's another tip. A real telephone is the best way to do a radio interview because it gets the best quality, and somehow it lasts the line. You can talk on and on and on, where when I use my cell phone, it cuts out right in the middle of the interview. I can't tell you how many times it's happened. So a landline is good. And what you want to do is you want to take your recording, and then it's called repurposing it or using it over and over and over again. First thing you do is you create what's known as a media page, and you put it on your website. You can go to one of these fulfillment centers. They're all over the place, and for $1, they can put 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of these interviews on a disc, and you can mail that out. You can transcribe it and make it into an article, a Facebook post, a LinkedIn article. I like to use LinkedIn on Pulse and turn it into an article. Then you can attach it to your LinkedIn profile, which gives you more credibility. You can turn it into a recording for a pre-recorded message. You can use part of it as an opt-in page to get people to give you your email address. In other words, you put like
a lead magnet.
Yeah, you put the first 15 or 20 seconds of the interview on the website, and then it stops. And then you say, to hear the rest of this interview, give them your email address. It's a real easy way of getting it. Most people do it because they like to hear the interview.
Great idea.
And there's many different ways you can do it. And then the nice thing about it is that you can even embed it, I found out just recently, in different types of communications on a website, online. And as a matter of fact, I'm learning how to do this, is where you can actually embed it in a post. You can upload it if you belong to a group, where, like either a Facebook group, a private Facebook group, a public group. You can upload it into groups on LinkedIn. I think I've got a list of about 15 or 20 different ways they can use it, and these number of ways keep growing as the different tools and the Internet expands, because it's expanding at a rate I can't even keep up with it.
Well, that's certainly true. One of the things you said that I think is often probably overlooked today, because we live in an age of digital technology, but I think it still would be a really valuable thing to do. And what you said, Joel, was you said you could get your interviews put on a CD or a disc and give that to people. You could mail it to people or hand it to people. And why that stuck out in my mind so much is because, again, we live in this digital age and everything is digital this, digital that. But when you have something, a physical thing, like a CD or something that is like, well, here's a gift to you. This is like my 10 best interviews from 2000 whatever. But I think that could actually turn into like kind of like a book, how that's an ultimate business card. You can turn these interviews into a leader authority piece in a physical form that, for example, if you're going to be speaking, or you do a speaking engagement somewhere, or you're invited to someplace, that would be a really cool thing to put into the goodie bag, because sometimes a digital thing, you couldn't do that, or you could save it onto a thumb drive. Same effect, a branded thumb drive, Joel's, top interviews, on this thumb drive that could be put into a goodie bag or something. And then, of course, the offer. Before I ask you my final question, I do have one more thing that I wanted to ask you. What is the biggest myth or misconception about being on these radio shows?
Probably the biggest myth or misconception is that the ideal guest is listening to you.
Okay.
Because people go on these shows figuring, I'm going to go on this show, unless it's a really popular show like maybe Celebrity on Fire with this John Lee Dumas has got 200,000 people listening to it every day. But the biggest misconception is I'm going to go on the show, I'm going to make a nice presentation, people are going to listen to it, and then they're going to start calling me, and I'm going to generate traffic from it. And that's the furthest thing from the case. Because what this is the first step in generating the traffic and the ideal customers you need. And what makes it so much fun is it's a really nice way for you to introduce yourself to people. As a matter of fact, you're going back to the disc. I've even taken a disc with a bunch of interviews and stuck it in the front of a book.
Oh, very good idea.
When you give someone your book and they open it up, there's a little, you put on a little piece of tape or something, you make it look nice. There's this disc in an envelope, radios. You can also use it as a demo tape for speaking. This is a really good way to get speaking engagements because you can send it out to the event coordinator or an association or whoever you like, a local chamber of commerce, whoever you want to speak in front, and send them a demo tape. They can hear what you're saying.
That's a really, really good idea. I mean, you have provided, oh my goodness, so many wonderful ideas, and I bet you that people right now are they're like writing away and trying to think about, oh my goodness, how can I take action? How can I start booking these appointments? Can you just give us a little clue on what types of radio stations and podcasts are looking for guests, and what would you suggest be the first step in finding the radio shows that are seeking guests? Do you have a tip on that?
Sure. First of all, every single radio show is looking for guests.
So in other words, they need you.
They need you badly. They need you more than you need them, or at least as much. Now, there is a list that you can Google of different, what they call radio channels. Popular ones you've probably heard of is iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spreaker, Voice of America. There's about 8 or 10 different channels. If you go to the channels, like you go to iHeartRadio, they will give you a list of literally several hundred shows that are going on right this minute. And you can go through this list and click on it, and up will come a little graphic of what the name of the show is, a little bit of information about the host of the show and how to contact them. So all this information is available. As a matter of fact, what I do in order to get shows is I have a publicist, and we've put together a database of 900 different shows. And that's only the tip of the iceberg. And what we do is it was a little painstaking, it took a little time, but we actually email this list different topics that I'm talking about, not too often, once every week or two, but once every week or two I'm sending out 900 offers to be a guest on a show.
Oh, that is a really phenomenal idea. All I can tell you, Joel, is that this interview is solid gold. This should go on a paid site as solid gold authority tips on how to be the best confident radio guest ever. And what you've given us, even with just a few brief tips, you've actually given our listeners all of these very actionable items, things that they could take right now. They listen to this interview and they could go off to the races and probably be booked later this afternoon or tomorrow if they just put their mind to it. What do you think about that?
Totally agree. And you don't need 900 stations to start. That number might sound overwhelming to people. You can do it with 10 or 20.
Wow. That is really phenomenal.
It's just a matter of putting yourself out there in a professional way. And the two really important things is everything has to be done not from the point of view as I'm promoting myself, but from the point of view I'm promoting the talk show and the listening audience and giving them something that's worth listening to.
Right.
And if
so you're providing value.
Yeah, and if you do that, you accomplish so many things it's not even funny. like, for example, before we leave, one of the things that I want to offer people is I've got I call it my Big Break Radio cheat sheet, where how to get a big break on radio, which is fun. And I've got 44 tips that you can use, 44 different things you can do. Part of it is to give yourself a little preparation practice. Part of it is how to contact the actual talk shows, and part of it is what to say. And if you either PM me on Facebook, that's usually the easiest way to get a hold of me. Just PM Joel Helfer, or go on my LinkedIn account under my name and send me a message, or my email account, which is jhelfer, HELFER217@gmail.com. I'll send you this cheat sheet as a thank you for listening to this, and it should provide you with some real good, solid information.
Well, I definitely want that cheat sheet, and I'm going to put out a challenge, okay? I'm going to put out a challenge to everyone listening. I want you to do what Joel Helfer just told us to do. I want you to make up one sheet and come up with a topic, 5-minute topic, because obviously once you get booked, you'll know about how much time your interview will be. But get booked, and I want you to do this and see if you can get booked in the next 5 days. I should have said 24 hours, but I'm going to give them 5 days because I really honestly believe that if you take the steps that Joel Helfer outlined today, you will be able to get booked on at least one, if not more, online radio shows or offline radio shows, live radio shows like what's on your AM, FM dial that we're so familiar with. So I'm going to put that challenge out there. So Joel, where else can we find out about you? Do you have any other places? You said reach out to Joel Helfer on Facebook, LinkedIn, or to send you an email, and I will include those on the show notes.
I'm in the process of redoing my website. I'm in the process of redoing my website. It's called Success in Radio, and it's going to be out next week. Plus, you can go on Google and just punch in my name, and the first 2 pages of Google, I've got everything. I've got interviews, I've got press releases, I've got all kinds of stuff about me. So just put my name in there, Joel Helfer. And if that isn't good enough, if you send me a private message on Facebook, I'll be happy to give you my private phone number, and we'll talk directly, which is my favorite way of doing things.
Okay, great. So everybody, I'll just spell it for you. Joel, Helfer, HELFER. And we've told you how to get a hold of him. Joel, thank you so much. I just can't, thank you enough for helping us to understand how we can create and deliver a radio interview with confidence and ease so that you can land new ideal clients. And the tips you gave were just 100% on target, right on, and they will help you to build authority. They'll help you create impact, influence, and of course our favorite word is income. So thank you, Joel.
You're welcome. One last comment is I just give a little warning. This process is very addictive. Once you start doing radio interviews, you will like them so much, and particularly as you get better, that you won't be able to stop.
Well, I think I know, because I really, really enjoy doing interviews on both sides of the mic. I really do. I enjoy the interview process. I enjoy hearing stories. I just love hearing new, innovative ideas, and I think you've hit the nail on the head, Joel. You've got a really good take on this, and again, I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure speaking with you, Tammy, and thank you for the opportunity.
This is Tammy Patzer. Go make it a beautiful day.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.